Welcome back to MindScience, episode 23. Today I'd like to tackle an issue that everyone inevitably faces on the self-realization journey at some point, which is why you can't get enlightenment intellectually. Now, many seekers will spend years of their life, sometimes even decades, seeking to realize their true nature, but all that they ever get is more head knowledge, which typically leads them to an existential crisis at some point. They'll often say things like, "I understand oneness conceptually, but I don't experience it." And you can already see the paradox within this statement. If oneness is the ultimate reality and nothing but oneness exists, then how can you not be experiencing oneness? The problem is actually that you do experience oneness every second of every day, but you just don't understand it conceptually. And that's because, as I'm going to attempt to demonstrate in this video, you can't understand oneness intellectually. Now, before I explain why, I'd like to lay some context by telling you a little background story about myself. Many years ago, I was struggling with really severe depression, and I had been seeking enlightenment for about 4 to 5 years, and I had gained an enormous amount of head knowledge about it. But it wasn't my experience yet. I was suffering very deeply. Suicidal thoughts, hopelessness, and despair were my everyday experience of life. Nothing had any meaning anymore. Any pleasure I experienced felt futile and empty, and this reality was only growing darker by the day. I was living in the Bay Area at the time and working at Google as a full-time corporate personal trainer. I had every logical reason to be happy. I had a great job doing something I enjoyed at the best company in the world. I was a signed fitness model with a big agency in San Francisco. I was a national level bodybuilder, and I had the best family anyone could ask for. Nobody would have guessed that I was heading towards the brink. Now, during this season, I would spend my breaks at work by going up to a balcony above my gym and listening to Eckhart Tolle for about an hour or so. This was the only thing I could do at the time which gave me any kind of peace. And after about 2 to 3 months of doing this, I had a very profound inner realization while listening to a certain Eckhart Tolle lecture. I could see that this person that I called Aaron and all of his thoughts and feelings were just an elaborate program, a series of patterns that something in my mind was claiming as me. I could see clearly that my thoughts every single day were predictable and reliable. I think all the same things, I have all the same desires, and it leads me to all the same suffering. But my interest had suddenly shifted dramatically from what was thinking to what was observing all of it. What intelligence is able to see these patterns? I became fascinated by it. I became so fascinated by it that I lost all sense of being that character. I actually lost all sense of separation between myself and my environment. The trees were me, the sky was me, the clouds and the birds, and all the people I saw walking around. I was all of them. That same eternal conscious principle that I recognized in myself was shining through everything. And I realized that all the suffering we see in the world and all the suffering we create for ourselves is simply the result of not seeing that eternal light of consciousness within. I saw that even most people who consider themselves to be spiritual only knew that light as a concept, but they hadn't actually seen it within themselves yet. I saw that all my opinions about the world were meaningless, and that I truly knew nothing about reality. The only thing I knew for absolute certain was I am. And the joy that this realization gave me can never be put into words. I experienced pure inner bliss for 2 weeks straight. I forgot what suffering even felt like. It seemed like some kind of dream I once had, but now I had awakened to reality. And all of it, every last inch, was beautiful and good. So after 2 weeks of this incredible nirvana, my mind slowly started to come back online and suck me back into identification with my thoughts. In short, I began to suffer again. The patterns of the character slowly reemerged, and I just began to lose the perspective that I had found from that experience. As you can imagine, this was devastating to me. I felt like I had been given a 2-week free sample of enlightenment from heaven and then lost it. So from that point on, my sole mission in life was to get it back again. And from that point, I virtually walked out of my former life. I called my agent and quit my modeling job. I retired from bodybuilding and devoted all of my time to figuring out how to get my enlightenment back. It was like finding buried treasure and then forgetting where you buried it and searching all through the jungle to try and find it, but never being able to. So what I would do is I would literally walk the same path up to the balcony. I would sit in the same chair and listen to the same Eckhart Tolle lecture and wait for the realization to strike again. But of course, it never did. The problem was, my mind was searching for enlightenment like it was something to be had or achieved. And this is where we get into the paradox of why enlightenment isn't something that you get. And it's simply this. The character cannot get that there is no character. We tend to think that enlightenment is when the character gets that it isn't real. But of course, it can't. What is unreal cannot see its own unreality, or the illusion would collapse. Illusions only survive by not being seen. So all the seeking that we do for enlightenment actually just serves to reinforce the illusion of the character. As A Course in Miracles says, no one can overcome illusions unless he looks at them, for not looking is how they are protected. And so this is the craftiness of the ego. It will hide itself in the most noble places of all to keep out of sight. I mean, who would question the validity of the spiritual seeker? It has the most noble of intentions. Surely the seeker can't be the problem, can it? But if you are already the Christ, then any step you take to seek the Christ is already the denial of your own Christhood. As St. Francis of Assisi famously said, "What's looking is what you're looking for." The mind only wants concepts and information, because that is what gives it power. So it will trick you into thinking that enlightenment can be grasped as information, but the mind will only use that information against you, to keep you feeling lost and to keep you on an endless journey. The mind is addicted to knowledge. It will make you feel like every new concept you learn is the next clue on a scavenger hunt, leading you one step closer to finding that buried treasure. Every stone you turn over reinforces the feeling that you're getting closer to finding it. The mind will flatter you with how virtuous you are to be seeking so hard. But the mind has you exactly where it wants you, because the seeker never actually finds. The seeker is what keeps you from finding. How can the sun find its own shining? You have always been and always will be the universal self. The mind cannot change what you are. It can only distract you from realizing it by overwhelming you with endless thoughts about what it thinks you are instead. Imagine the mind as a batter that's designed to hit fastballs. Every time you try to understand enlightenment conceptually, you're throwing a meaty fastball right down the middle. The mind hits it out of the park every time. And this is because the mind loves thoughts. Thought is the oxygen the mind breathes. But suppose instead that you say, "I have no interest in searching. There's nothing to get. I'm already it." This is when you throw the mind a curveball. It doesn't know how to hit curveballs, so it swings and misses, and the ball lands firmly in the catcher's mitt. This is when something beyond the mind hears these words. Every ball that hits the mitt begins to reverberate through the mind and causes your true nature to begin to awaken and remember itself. As long as you're searching for enlightenment, the mind can take you on an endless wild goose chase. But if you call off the search, the mind doesn't know what to do with it. It will swing and miss every time, and eventually, the mind gets tired of swinging and missing and simply walks out of the batter's box. This is self-realization. It's simply the absence of interest in the mind. When the impulse to identify with the mind relaxes, there it is, the true nature, unborn, unbound, and eternally at peace. You have no idea how you could have missed it for so long. It seems like the most obvious thing in the world, but only in hindsight. And this is because you were trying to see it as the character. But the character is being imagined into existence. When that is recognized, suddenly all of the character's problems are seen to be mere hallucinations. Do they like me? Do people approve of me? Am I spiritual enough? Why can't I ever seem to get ahead? I wish I was better looking. You see that nothing in the ego's world offers you anything that you want. Everything you seek to make yourself greater in the ego's eyes only limits you further and hides the realization of your true nature, which leads to real and lasting liberation. So this was the realization that I eventually came to. I was looking for something that I would never find because it was never lost to begin with. The one who was trying so hard to get it never had it to begin with. The person is just a story. Aaron, the person, didn't become enlightened. He simply vanished for a little while, and in his place was an everlasting freedom. So only the mind seeks for enlightenment, which serves a purpose, of course, but this is the simple key to everything you've been looking for. You are already that. Always have been and always will be, and can never be anything else. The character who seeks for liberation is a hallucination. There are patterns and programs which are being endowed with an identity as if they were an entity. But when you step back from them and observe, you see them for what they are. Patterns and programs. There is nobody there. I am the eternal self. What else could I be? If only oneness exists, then self-realization must begin with accepting what is eternally true and rejecting anything which would say otherwise. I am already what I seek. The end. There is nothing to get and there's nowhere to arrive. By trying to grasp your true nature intellectually, you become like a poor blind beggar at the city gates, sitting on top of a treasure chest of gold. What you seek for is earlier than the mind. The mind came after it, so it cannot be understood. It can only be experienced. All you can do is see what is not true. And by seeing what isn't true, you begin to embody its opposite. You begin to embody your true nature, an inner peace, a lack of desire to prove yourself, to defend yourself, to form judgments and opinions, to complain and resist things. It all becomes seen as nonsense. Why would that which lacks nothing need to defend or prove itself? Instead, there is just a perfect harmony within the self. Life is discerned but not judged. Pleasure is experienced without attachment, and pain is experienced without resistance. So if I am already the Christ, then I can't talk to Aaron about the Christ, because what hears it is just the mind. More concepts and knowledge that will be used to reinforce the character, the one who's on this endless seeking journey. But I can talk to the Christ about Aaron. When the Christ in you sees what you're not, you begin to wake up. So if you're seeking for self-realization, the practice is simply this. Observe whatever arises in your mind without attachment. Simply recognize that it isn't you. The mind wants you to engage with it. It says, "Come on, think about me. You're so close. You might actually get it this time. If you just think a little bit longer, you're going to arrive at the truth." And your only response to this needs to be, nothing to get, nothing to understand. I'm already it. By waving the white flag of surrender, you confuse the mind into a sleep. The ego isn't designed to deal with non-resistance. So as often as the mind delivers you thoughts which would tempt you to seek, to search, or to understand what you are. You simply keep quiet and remain in what you know is eternally true. I am the Christ, the Son of the living God. So what is there to seek? I and my Father are one forevermore.